I really enjoyed preaching on Elijah last week and not having to deal with the book of Titus since it was so boring. So since I only have 4 sermons left to give in my time at these churches, I figured that instead of going through the rest of the New Testament like previously planned, I'm actually going to preach on 3 of my favorite biblical texts and or stories, just because it's more fun that way for me. And if you're someone who was looking forward to hearing about the book of Revelation because we are in this New Testament series, don't worry, that will be included in one of these sermons because I love that letter. Well, last week before church, I was talking about our Native American brothers and sisters with Tom, and then during our time of communal prayer, Russ brought up the fact that Monday was Indigenous Peoples Day. So on Monday, to remember the indigenous people of the past and those who are still with us, I grabbed a book off my bookshelf that's all about Lakota spirituality and just started flipping through it. And I got to a part in the book that tells the Lakota creation story, or at least one of them, and this is a summary of how that goes. It says that the Great Spirit was displeased with the world, and so he decided to flood it, killing all of the humans and animals. Well, where have we heard that before? Once the rain stopped, all things on earth had died except for a single crow named Kanji or Kongi. Kongi pleaded with the Great Spirit to make him a new place to rest. So listening to Kongi, the Great Spirit decided it was time to make his new world, and from his huge bag he chose 4 animals that could swim, so they could swim down to the ocean floor and retrieve some mud. Now the loon, the otter, and the beaver, 3 of the 4 animals, they all failed at getting some mud, but the turtle was triumphant and brought the Great Spirit all this mud. And the turtle kind of solidified, and the Great Spirit created land out of this turtle. It took many animals and birds out of his bag and flooded the earth with them. And then from the different colors of mud that existed on the new land, the Great Spirit made humans of all different colors. Now, what a cool story. Reading on, the author states that the Lakota prefer to believe that the Spirit of God is not breathed into humans alone, but that the whole created universe shares in the immortal perfection of its maker. So the tree, the waterfall, the grizzly bear, each is an embodied force with some degree of a soul. I thought that was fascinating. The Lakota believe that we can see God in all things, from the tiniest bug to the expansive complexities of the universe. And I can get behind that for sure. So I sat and started thinking about other creation stories for a bit. And I spent some time traveling to Japan and going to different Shinto shrines. And for the Japanese, the earliest creation story, which originated around 712 to 720 CE, says that 2 gods dipped a spear in the ocean. And when they pulled the spear out, the drops of water from the spear dripped. And when those drops hit the water, they formed into the islands of Japan. Pretty cool story. From the Aborigine people of Australia, they have a concept called the dream time. And it's this period in which life was created. This story is said to have been told for the previous 65,000 years, but it didn't show up in writings until about the 1890s. It states that all living things were either the ancestors themselves or were made by the ancestors. The dream time is actually still a concept to some Aborigine cultures today, as it's this beautiful concept that creation isn't finished and people are constantly evolving. Your story is not finished. And then we have our creation story, right, that we all know so well. Genesis chapter 1 is written in poetry form. It's a poem. And what's so interesting is the poet keeps insisting that we are here for this extraordinary opportunity to make something of our lives. It's creation and the continual act of creation. It isn't just that we're here and we're created, but it's that we have an opportunity to make something of the world. So what you find consistently in the scriptures is this affirmation that we live in a generative reality, that we can actually generate new things, which is a great way to start a book, right? But have you ever wondered why our creation story from Genesis chapter 1 was written the way it was? Now, the first book of the Bible, Genesis, is not the Bible's oldest book. The Genesis creation accounts were compiled in their present form as late as about 500 BCE. During this period, the Jews were likely in exile in Babylon, where they were exposed to multiple creation stories, especially the Anumah Elish. Now, who has ever heard of Anumah Elish? Apart from the Aborigine Dreamtime stories, Anuma Elish is known to be one of the oldest creation accounts, dating back thousands of years prior to the Jewish and Christian creation account. And this is a quick summary of Anuma Elish. It says, in the beginning, look, they even start the same, Marduk created the heavens and earth. There were many gods, and the cosmos, it was chaotic and wild and unformed. Abzu, the god of fresh river water, and his wife Tiamat, the goddess of the salt waters of the deep, they ruled over all the gods. But the other gods created so much noise, literally Babel, that Abzu could never rest, and he plotted to kill them all. However, when Enki and Mumu, the gods of knowledge, found out about Abzu's plot, they killed him. Then came a great battle between Marduk and Tiamat, and it goes a little something like this. Marduk killed Tiamat. Then Marduk used a great wind to split half of Tiamat in two. Then the first half of Tiamat became the ocean. The second half of Tiamat became a dome of water above the earth. We see that in our creation story. The remainder of her corpse created the heavens and the earth, and Tiamat's blood created humankind, who would become Marduk's slaves to kill anyone that made too much babble. Now that we've heard that, let's go ahead and read a couple different verses out of Genesis 1. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. And God said, let there be a dome in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. Skipping down to verse 26, it says, then God said, let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness. And verse 31 says, God saw everything that God had made, and indeed it was very good. So, when the Jews were in exile in Babylon, if they were to ask any local about the origins of the world, they would have had to heard the story as told in Anuma Elish. And when they found themselves confronted with that story, they would have started thinking about their own traditions and their own story. This is when our Genesis creation account is written down, and it depicts a very different worldview. Our creation story says that there's a whole different way to view and live in the world. Humanity's core question about origin is whether the engine of creation is violence and destruction, like Anuma Elish, or overflowing love, joy, and creativity, like Genesis 1. Is our starting point love and abundance? Or is it fear and hatred? Because how we begin is invariably how we end and how we proceed. And both possibilities are rather visible in the world. When we start in a positive way instead of with a problem, there's a much greater chance we will remain positive as we move forward. And our starting point in Genesis chapter 1 is totally positive. What does the first chapter of the Bible tell us? What is the one thing that every human being that has ever been created shares with one another? That we are all made in the image and likeness of God, and we are very good. We came from goodness. We are slowly ticking toward goodness, and we will end in goodness. All this goodness is a pure gift. But what does it mean for us Christians to bear the image of the divine? We already and always have had the divine image, the imago Dei within us. But we hopefully will grow into the divine likeness as we begin to externally resemble the goodness of God and find our own unique way of embodying love. Being made in the image of God means that we see a drive to self-transcend. We see God creates things, but also delegates the power for these things to create more things. God says, go forth and multiply. And that was the command, not just to humanity, but to every living thing. The whole thing is rigged to make more and to move beyond itself. This is why selfishness is such a huge, destructive spiritual condition. When your life is more and more about you, then you're moving in the opposite direction from how the universe works. We're meant to move beyond ourselves for the joy and blessing of others. Being made in the image of God also explains why we love to make things, because we intuitively know that we are here to make something beautiful of the world, and anything that obstructs or hinders human flourishing should be dealt with so that we might be true to who we were created to be. In this poem, we're created by a creator to be co-creators and create something interesting in this world. In all of Scripture, I think one of the most incredible representations of being made in the image of God and God's overflowing love for this good creation shows up in Matthew chapter 3 at Jesus' baptism. The word from the divine in Matthew 3 is, "This is my son whom I love, and with him I am well pleased." Now wait, this is at the beginning of Jesus' ministry. He hasn't done anything yet. No sermons, no crowds, no, ooh, this must be the Son of God, none of it. The divine voice of blessing and affirmation occurs before Jesus has done anything impressive. But what we do, we try to do as many impressive things that we can to earn that divine voice, don't we? But the model we have in Jesus, the model of full humanity, the image of God in all its completeness, is that the divine voice speaks the word, "This is my boy." That's actually what we all want, right? What we really want in all of our searching and striving and working, what we really want to hear is, "This is my daughter. With her I am well pleased." Or, "This is my son. He's kind of a weird one, but he's my boy. This is my daughter, and I love her." Maybe that's what it means to be made in the image of God. That we can be aware of this overflowing love, and that we get to extend it to others. Think about it. If Jesus is the direct revelation of God, and our goal is to follow in the footsteps of our Rabbi Jesus, then we as people of faith are the embodiment of the goodness that exists within God and the goodness that was put into place during creation. We were called very good, and our lives are a representation of that goodness. So then how do we personify the Genesis 1 verse? How do you bring beauty and new creation into the world? How can you turn this concept of being made in the image of God into something tangible and palpable? What is your greatest talent and gifts and passions? How can you use those things to bring beauty into the world? Maybe you're someone who just loves to serve others. Then serve others. Make that your shtick. Go serve others and bring beauty into the world. Maybe you love your grandkids and you're just a kind person, will love everyone and be kind to people. Use that thing in your life to bring love and joy and beauty into this world as we take on and bear the image of the divine. Amen.